I flirted with my boyfriend's roommate to make him jealous. Now his side of the closet is empty and he won't even read my texts. It's been 3 days and his side of the closet is still the loudest thing in the apartment. It's not empty in a quiet way, it's a screaming void. And it smells wrong. It smells like cheap cleaner, the kind you use to scrub away a stain you never want to see again. His smell, that mix of sandalwood soap and the faint worn-in scent of his favorite hoodie, is gone. Erased. My thumb has its own muscle memory now, a nervous twitch that unlocks my phone and pulls up my messages with Anderson about a dozen times an hour. The screen is a monument to my own stupidity. A massive, rambling block of text I sent 2 nights ago, a desperate mix of "I'm so sorry," "it was just a joke," and "please, can we just talk?" Underneath it, sitting there like a tiny gray tombstone, is the word "delivered." It hasn't changed. It won't change, I know I messed up. God, I know, you can call me an idiot, a monster, whatever you want, I probably deserve it, but I just don't understand how this is my life now. How does one single, monumentally stupid night end everything? He didn't scream, he didn't throw things, he just packed a bag and walked out. And now his side of the closet is empty, and he won't even read my texts. Anderson wasn't the kind of guy who wrote poetry or showered you with compliments. His love language was quiet, solid, and practical. I remember once I came down with a vicious flu that left me bedridden and miserable. He didn't just bring me soup. He transformed our bedroom into a recovery ward. He bought a humidifier, 3 different kinds of herbal tea, a new, ridiculously soft blanket, and a stack of my favorite magazines. He set up my laptop on a tray, already queued up with the Comfort Watch show he usually found boring, and just said, "Text me if you need anything." He never said, "Oh, you poor thing," or "I hope you feel better." He just quietly and efficiently made things better. That was Anderson. His love was a verb. In the quiet moments, just the two of us, it felt like the most profound form of care, but that kind of story doesn't get likes on Instagram. It doesn't make for a thrilling anecdote at brunch. And my friends, led by our unofficial queen bee, Jessica, operated on a different currency of affection. Their relationships were a performance, a constant broadcast of grand gestures and dramatic declarations. Their group chat, unironically named Goddess Gang, was a relentless stream of screenshots and humble brags. Jessica would post a picture of a designer handbag captioned, "Just a little something from Michael for surviving Monday." Another friend would share a video of her apartment filled with balloons for a 3-month anniversary. The captions were always the same: boyfriend goals, spoiled, he worships me. It was a digital coliseum of competitive affection. My silence in these conversations felt like a failure. When Jessica would ask, "So, what did Anderson do for you this week?" and I'd mention he fixed the leaky faucet, she'd give me that pitying little smile. "Oh, that's useful," she'd say, the unspoken words hanging in the air, "but does he worship you? Does he make you feel like a goddess?" The pressure was immense, a constant, nagging voice that whispered I wasn't desirable enough, that Anderson's steady, quiet love was somehow deficient. I started manufacturing tests. I'd spend an hour getting ready for a simple dinner out, and when he'd greet me with a simple, warm, "You look great, honey," my heart would sink. Great. Not stunning, not breathtaking. I was trying to get him to read from a script he'd never even seen. There was one thing Anderson was very clear about, a boundary he'd drawn so firmly it was practically etched in stone. He couldn't stand public disrespect. It was his one true red line, a raw nerve connected directly to his childhood. I remember the conversation vividly now. We were watching some trashy reality show where a wife publicly shamed her husband for a minor mistake. He physically flinched and turned off the TV. That's when he told me, in a rare moment of vulnerability, about his parents' toxic divorce. The final, irreparable crack wasn't an affair or a huge fight behind closed doors. It was his mother at a family barbecue making a series of jokes at his father's expense. Jokes about his job, his weight, his thinning hair. Anderson described watching his father's face crumble, the public humiliation sucking all the light out of him. "She didn't just leave him," Anderson had said, his voice tight with a pain that was clearly still fresh. "She made him small in front of everyone first. I will never ever be with someone who thinks that's okay." I'd held his hand, looked him right in the eye, and swore I would never do that to him. The most tragic part is, in that moment, I meant it with every fiber of my being. The stage for my grand, idiotic performance was a casual Friday night get-together at our apartment. It wasn't even a party, just a low-key hangout. The audience was small but hand-picked for maximum impact: Anderson, his roommate Miles, and my chief enabler Jessica. I had spent the better part of 2 hours getting ready, a ridiculous amount of effort for a night of pizza and board games. New dress, the one that was a little too tight and a little too low cut, the kind of dress you wear when you want to make a statement. Hair perfectly styled, makeup meticulously applied. I was hunting for a compliment, desperate for a piece of validation I could mentally screenshot and present to my friends later as proof of Anderson's devotion. When I finally made my entrance, Anderson was on his laptop at the kitchen counter, brow furrowed over some work project that had been stressing him out all week. He looked up and a brief, tired smile touched his lips. "Hey, you look nice," he said, his eyes already drifting back to the glowing screen. Nice. It landed in my chest like a lead weight. It wasn't an insult, but in my hypersensitive, validation-starved state, it felt like one. Nice was what you said about a new lamp. It was beige. It was forgettable. I glanced over at Jessica, who was perched on a bar stool, sipping a glass of wine. She caught my eye and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head, a look that said everything. "See, this is what I was talking about. He doesn't appreciate you." That look was the spark. The simmering resentment and insecurity inside me ignited. Fine. If my own boyfriend wouldn't acknowledge me, I'd make him acknowledge me. I'd make him see what he was taking for granted. My target was Miles. Sweet, harmless Miles, who was Anderson's oldest friend and probably the least threatening man on the planet. He was the perfect prop. Fueled by a second glass of wine and Jessica's silent encouragement, I launched my campaign. I moved from the living room to the kitchen, deliberately positioning myself next to Miles as he was explaining the rules to a new board game. I started laughing, loudly and a little too shrilly, at one of his famously terrible puns. "Oh my God, Miles, you're hilarious," I exclaimed, placing a hand on his arm and letting it linger just a second too long. Miles, bless his heart, just looked confused, but I was no longer playing for him. I could feel Anderson's presence behind me, the occasional click of his keyboard the only sound he was making. I turned up the volume. I started asking Miles about his dating life, leaning in conspiratorially. "So any lucky lady in the picture? It's just so hard to believe a great guy like you is single." My voice was light and flirty, every word a performance for an audience of one. When Miles reached for the bowl of chips on the counter, I reached at the same time, engineering a clumsy brush of our hands. I pulled back with a theatrical gasp. "Oh. Sorry about that," I said, looking at him through my lashes. The air thickened with awkwardness. Even Jessica was starting to look uncomfortable. Out of the corner of my eye, I watched Anderson. I was expecting something. A flicker of jealousy, a tightening of his jaw, maybe even an annoyed sigh that would prove my power. Instead, there was nothing. His face, when I dared a full glance, was unnervingly calm. The frantic typing had stopped. He was just sitting there watching me, his expression becoming progressively more blank, like a slate being slowly wiped clean. It wasn't anger, it was detachment. He was watching me the way you'd watch a stranger make a scene in a restaurant. This terrifying lack of reaction only made me more desperate. I had to get a response, I had to prove Jessica wrong. So I pushed it even further, my actions becoming more and more cringeworthy. I complimented Miles on his shirt, running my hand over the fabric of his sleeve to feel the material. It was a pathetic, transparent plea for attention that I was disguising as a harmless joke, and the only person who wasn't in on it was me. The charade couldn't last. The atmosphere in the room had grown so thick with tension you could barely breathe. Miles, looking deeply uncomfortable, suddenly remembered an early morning he had and made a hasty exit. Jessica, my supposed partner in crime, followed suit moments later, giving me a weak, unconvincing "see you Monday" over her shoulder. She couldn't get out of there fast enough. The click of the front door shutting echoed in the sudden, deafening silence. It was just the two of us. I tried to break the silence with a laugh, but it came out as a strangled, nervous cough. "God, Miles is so awkward, right?" I said, turning to Anderson with a wide, fake smile plastered on my face. "So what was I saying? Oh, right. Jealous yet?" I winked, a final, pathetic attempt to frame the entire, excruciating ordeal as a playful bit of teasing. He didn't take the bait. He didn't rise to the argument I was so clearly trying to provoke. Anderson slowly closed his laptop. The soft click was the loudest sound in the room. He turned on his stool to face me fully, and the look in his eyes made my stomach plummet. It wasn't the fiery anger I had expected, or even the hurt jealousy I had craved. It was a calm, profound, and utterly devastating disappointment. It was the look you give someone you no longer recognize. "I don't play these games, Sylvie," he said, his voice level and devoid of emotion. It was colder than any shout could have been. "We're done." The words didn't register at first. They were too simple, too final. "What, don't be so dramatic," I scoffed, the defensive anger finally bubbling up. "It was a joke. I was just messing with you because you were ignoring me." "That wasn't a joke," he stated, not as an accusation but as a fact. This was his overly principled nature in its purest, most unyielding form. You humiliated me in our home in front of my best friend. You took the one thing I ever asked you not to do, and you did it for sport. He stood up and walked towards the bedroom. I followed him, my panic finally setting in. Anderson, wait, let's just talk about this. You can't just end things over something so stupid. He didn't turn around. He just pulled a duffel bag from the top of the closet, his side of the closet, and started methodically placing clothes inside. A few t-shirts, a pair of jeans, his toothbrush from the bathroom. There was no rage, no frantic energy, just a quiet, efficient severance. This was his cold cutoff. It was happening right in front of me, and I was powerless to stop it. I'll arrange a time to get the rest of my things, he said, his back still to me. And then he walked out of the bedroom, past me in the hallway without a glance, and out the front door. The deadbolt turning was the final sound, the end of us. And I just stood there in the middle of the living room, the echo of his words. We're done, ringing in an apartment that suddenly felt cavernous and empty. For the first 24 hours, I lived in a state of suspended disbelief. I replayed the scene in my head, editing it, softening the edges. It was just a silly argument. I was just being playful, he was just being overly sensitive. I told myself he was cooling off at Miles's place or maybe crashing on his brother's couch. He was a man of principles, sure, but he wasn't unreasonable. He'd get over it. Tomorrow he'd walk back through that door, we'd have the huge, screaming fight we were supposed to have, and then we'd make up. That's how it worked. That's how it always worked in the stories Jessica told. I even rehearsed my lines, a mix of indignant self-defense and magnanimous forgiveness. But tomorrow came and the apartment was still silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator, a noise I'd never noticed before. My barrage of texts, first angry, you're really going to end 3 years over a joke? Then apologetic, okay, I'm sorry, I took it too far, please just come home. Then just pathetic strings of question marks, remain stubbornly marked delivered. My calls went straight to voicemail, each automated rejection chipping away at my denial. By the second day, a cold, slithering panic had taken root in my stomach. He wasn't just cooling off, this was real. In a desperate move, I called the one person who had been a witness, my supposed ally. Jessica, I said, my voice cracking as soon as she picked up. He actually left. He won't answer my calls. I don't know what to do. I expected a strategy session, a pep talk, maybe even an offer to do some reconnaissance. I was waiting for her to say, he's such a child, we'll make him regret this. Instead, I was met with a wall of awkwardness. Oh wow, that's crazy, Sylvie, she said, her voice strained. There was a distinct lack of her usual confident, man-hating bravado. Listen, I'm sure he just needs some space. You know how guys are. I could hear the sound of her typing in the background. She was multitasking me. Hey, I'm actually walking into a meeting right now. Can I call you back later? She never did. I sent a follow-up text a few hours later, a simple hey, free to talk, and the three little dots appeared and disappeared for a full minute before she replied with a single, dismissive thumbs-up emoji. That was the moment of my reality check, the realization that my friends were just an audience. They loved the drama of the performance, but they had no interest in helping clean up the mess afterward. Their awkward distancing was more damning than any lecture. I was completely, utterly alone in this. That night, consumed by a frantic need to do something, I remembered our shared iPad. We used it for recipes and streaming shows in the kitchen. Maybe he'd logged into a social media account. Maybe I could find a friend of his to contact, someone who could talk some sense into him. I unlocked it, my fingers trembling slightly, and tapped open the browser, and there it was. His search history, it was a digital trail of his escape plan. How to break a lease in California. Short-term furnished apartments downtown. A moving company quotes one bedroom. Can my ex-girlfriend legally keep my security deposit? My heart stopped. I scrolled down, my breath catching in my throat. The searches went back for weeks, long before my stupid, theatrical flirtation. There were links to articles like, signs your partner doesn't respect you, when to walk away from a one-sided relationship, and emotional exhaustion in a relationship. He had even bookmarked a forum thread titled, My girlfriend is more concerned with her friends' opinions than my feelings. My little performance hadn't been the bomb that destroyed our relationship. It was just the detonator for a bomb he had already built. I was the final piece of evidence in a case he had been building against me for months. He hadn't just left me because of one night, he had been planning to leave the person I had become. The flirtation with Miles wasn't the cause of death, it was just the time of death. It's been 2 weeks. He came for the rest of his things last Tuesday while I was at work. I know this because he texted me, the first and only communication I've received. It was brutally efficient. Hi Sylvie, I'm having movers come by between 1 and 3 p.m. today to get my things. I've asked Miles to be there to let them in. The key is on the counter. I've sent you my half of the rent. No anger, no sadness, just logistics. He treated the end of our life together like a business transaction. Now the apartment is just a collection of echoes. The empty space on the bookshelf where his history books used to be, the hook by the door where his keys always hung. I live like a ghost in a museum of a life I single-handedly demolished. The silence is the worst part. It's a physical presence pressing in on me, reminding me of the easy, comfortable silence we used to share. My life has shrunk to the size of my phone screen. I've descended into the special kind of hell reserved for the social media stalker. I deactivated my own accounts. The thought of Jessica's pitying comments was too much to bear and created a new, anonymous profile. A burner account with a generic flower avatar and 0 followers. From this pathetic digital foxhole I watch him, I refresh his page dozens, maybe hundreds of times a day. Every new post is a fresh stab to the heart. He's not heartbroken, he's not even sad, he looks free. There's a picture of him and some friends on a mountain, the sky a brilliant, cloudless blue behind them. He's smiling, a real, unburdened smile I realize I haven't seen in months. There's another photo, a casual shot of him and Miles on the couch in their new apartment, laughing at something on TV, pizza boxes on the coffee table. He's living his life, the same life he had before, just without me in it. The real gut punch came last night. It was a picture of a perfectly organized toolbox with a caption that read, "Finally got everything set up." Feels good to have a space where things are exactly where they're supposed to be. It wasn't about the tools, it was about me. I was the chaos, the thing that didn't fit, the piece that had to be removed for him to feel organized and calm. I was the clown who put on a show for an audience that didn't care, and in the process, I pushed away the only person who ever truly saw me. Now the show is over, the theater is empty, and I'm left here, alone in the dark, endlessly scrolling through pictures of a life I was supposed to be in.